Okay, so I'm back for a minute and I've decided to go off on a little digression. I realize that some of you old guys, that if I've captivated your interest enough that you're going to be watching this, some of you are going to realize that I've used the term 243 Ackley barrel and I'm chambering it to a 6x47. I've explained that my 6x47 is different than everybody else's, but that's neat. That doesn't change the fact that anybody who's done this before is going to say, dude, you're going to end up running out of threading surface, and here's why. This again is not for the old guys that are catching this. This is for the young heads full of mush that have never done this before, and just to illustrate again how easy it is to screw something up. The 243 Ackley case is a very nearly parallel sidewall case with a steep 40-degree shoulder angle that Steve Tim back in the days of that one varmint hunting magazine would call jaunty. I really liked Steve Tim's writing. So anyway, this is the 243 Ackley case. Now, if I'm going to take this 243 which is not an exact representation, by the way, to those of you from the Heartbone that are going to, pick on me for it. It's not even to scale, unfortunately. So here we are. 243 Ackley is very nearly parallel. It's got steep shoulders. All known iterations of the 6x47 are not shaped like that. In fact, they're a lot shorter and they have a more typical, probably a 35-degree. Mine has a 35-degree angle. And they fit inside of this. The case is a couple hundred thousand shorter. And even if I were to whack the back of the barrel off and start my new cartridge case right here to give it some room, it still is liable to come down like this before it goes down to the neck. So I have to be careful and realize now, in my case, I've got two things working in my favor. Number one, my design of the 6x47 is what I call the fat butt chamber, which means that it's a fatty. It's wider than usual back here. I'm going to throw this number out. The 243 Ackley that I measured up prior to starting this project is quite a bit smaller than that. So it starts, my case starts out here. Then the interesting thing is going to be, okay, where does it cross over and go inside of this case? Well, here's the other thing that I did 20 years ago on my iteration of the 6x47 is I didn't Ackleyfy it, but I came pretty stinking close. Turns out that my 6x47 and the 243 Ackley barrel that I chose, I've had them done by 3 different people with 3 different reamers, and I owned my own reamer that was different again. But this Ackley chamber and the 6x47 chamber I'm going for, it turns out, net out, as nearly as I can tell, at the same place. The Eld Ackley is 461, 0.461. My 6x47 is 0.461. So I took it one step further and I closed my caliper jaws down on one of the cases and I tried to slide the other case up inside of it, and they crossed over at a point about 100 thousandths apart. I won't tell you which one is bigger and which one was smaller because that's just useless information. But the shoulders of the two cases slid into a parallel surface like this. One of them was slightly ahead of the other, but only by about 100 thou. So what this comes down to is I can clean up that chamber with the new chamber. That would leave one other problem, the fact that we found eccentricity in the back of this chamber. Let's call it 1,000th. By the time we get up here, that might be down to a little less than 1,000th, but it's still going to be something. So that means that I need to push this in far enough, this new case in far enough, that I get far enough to clean up all the eccentricity that's in that chamber. That chamber is 4 or 5 thou, it's actually about a half a thou, 4 or 5 10,000ths wobble in it. So I've got to account for the wobble, and I've got to account for the depth. Luckily I have plenty of room on here to bring this tenon down far enough that my new chamber can move ahead far enough to where it's going to be something more like, here's Ackley. So I'm going to make my new chamber somewhere out in here. Whoops. Boy. My new chamber is going to start somewhere out in here. Make this black enough, maybe it'll look like a cartridge case again, so that when it comes back, when the new cuts come back, they completely subsume that old chamber. And I'm going to have to cut an inch or so off the back to allow that to happen. But just in the interest of full disclosure, as I said, this ain't for you old guys that recognize this, that have done it before. And what happened is, I myself personally, the first time I threw a chamber into another chamber, I misfigured my numbers, and I ended up with a chamber that was nice, 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 and then right at the end, pink, it changed by about 1 degree because I hadn't entirely wiped out the old chamber. Made for some sizing difficulties. At that time I was kind of playing with neck sizing only, which incidentally is not bad. The only downside to neck size only is that number one, you have to shoot kind of light loads. Still hotter than the reloading books, so light to a guy talking in bench rest terms is very different than light from a reloading manual. And over time, the brass doesn't spring back completely every time. You bounce it out 100 thou and it comes back 98 thou. You bounce it out 100 thou, it comes back 98 thou. So incrementally, the brass gets tighter and tighter by a couple 10,000ths each time. So, long story short, firing hot after 5 or 7 or 8 rounds, you can no longer get the brass into the chamber without wrecking your bolt lugs. And even firing at a moderate pressure, which is, let's say it's reloading book pressure, with a bench rest cartridge, there's times, back in the day the standard was 6 ppc, 68 grain bullet at 3250, which is a very mild, very moderate, and there were guys doing neck size only and just keeping their bolt lugs greased up, closing down pretty hard every time, that were wearing out cases, getting zeros, multiple 20, 30, 50, 100 firings out of cases. Then people started ramping up, and this whole culture was built up where you can't win unless you're going up 3350, 3400, which is all false, but that's, we don't want to go into that argument. That's what makes you win, is what makes you feel good. So if you're going to shoot a 3350 or 3400 or 3450, you're gonna have to resize. So then you got these guys that would go neck size only, and then every 4th or 5th round when it got tight, they'd run it through a body sizing die. Well, that's an abomination, because here you've got, well, figure it out. If you got 20, 30, 50 cases, what if you have a few cases left? You go shoot them into the bank so that you can have them all resized so that they're all the same. It's really, really, if there's a real kink into that, trying to get consistent, shot after shot, day after day, egg after egg, reload after reload, match after match, day after, year after year in my case. This chamber that I'm going to put in here to fire form some new brass is because I've got brass cases that have been fired in 5 different barrels. They are starting to, they're not showing anywhere, but I'm going to make some new ones anyway for whatever reason, maybe just to make the video. So, building this fire form barrel, and I wanted to throw out there, these kind of pictures. I drew it in ink and it didn't really show, so I drew it again in this so that it shows on the camera, kind of showing you that I have to completely wipe out the old chamber and catch those threads and make some more threads to make my fire form barrel. Is what it is. We shall proceed. until the train crashes into the, or runs off the tracks.